That one's drilled deep to right field.
Hurts going deep for it all. Devontae Smith. He has been fantastic in this fourth. Wow.
A break in on goal, and he scores.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Two Mics All Sports. I'm your host, Zachary JB, joined by my special guest today, Cal. What's going on, man?
What's going on? I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to be giving you guys our college football national championship previews / predictions. We're going to be talking about each team in particular and then give our predictions on what we expect to happen in the national championship tonight. But before we get into it, Cal, what were your thoughts the second year of the expansion of the college football playoffs? How are you feeling about it as a whole, and do you feel like it's been a massive success ever since last year starting?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's been a great success. You see these smaller teams that have been getting in, like Tulane, JMU. Obviously, it's hard to put up a fight against these bigger Power 5, G5 teams. So it's been really cool to see all these teams go and battle it out and have more of a kind of like NFL-like tournament that they have going on there. It's been really fun to watch these past few years. I always thought that only having 4 teams was a little iffy because, I mean, it's really hard to get in if you only have 4 teams. And, you know, the big 4 teams, like you thought Georgia was always going to be there. You thought Alabama was always going to be there. So it's just cool to see teams like Miami, who was the 10th seed, go get to the national championship, beating a team like Ole Miss, who lost their head coach before the playoffs started. So it's just these cool little stories and things going on with the 12-man playoff that I like, and I even think they could probably expand it a few more teams, give some more teams a chance, and kind of give more games to watch, more fun games to watch, and it might make the NCAA some more money. So but it's been fun. I love watching the college football playoffs.
Yeah. I think another thing it gives these teams motivation, because you talk about the 14 playoffs. Once you hit 2 losses, these teams gave up on their seasons. They knew they stood no chance whatsoever to make the playoffs. But now you get these teams, you're fighting till like the final weeks of the season. And I like you bring up the point. I would even do even more expansion, because this year you had the big debate of who should get that 9 and 10 spot. Obviously, they gave 1 to Alabama, and then they gave 10 to Miami. Miami's taking it all the way to the national championship. Like, Notre Dame obviously got the short end of the stick. Another team that wasn't talked about enough that also got the short end of the stick, I think, was BYU, because I brought up the point where it's like Alabama and BYU both got chosen to play in those games. They decided to play in those games. One team got punished and one team didn't, and they both got blown out. Both results were not clean whatsoever, but one team, because of their ability, got on and another team didn't. And Alabama didn't even go that far. Yes, they had a good win against Oklahoma, but when it came to good competition in Indiana, they got destroyed. So
Yeah, and that happened with too. Like Virginia, they were a 2-loss team. They lost to Duke in their championship game, and they didn't make it. And it's just unfortunate because these teams play so well all throughout the year. They get to this game that's pretty much meaningless. I mean, obviously, you want to fight for your division championship, but you get to this game and it's pretty much meaningless, and you lose, and that just takes you completely out of it. Obviously, Alabama lost, and they stayed in. I mean, obviously, there's a little bit of SEC bias there, and it's Alabama, big name, been to the national championship hundreds of times, and so yes, it's like these smaller teams are not making it in because they're getting these losses like BYU, like Virginia. But these other teams like Alabama, who actually did lose to Georgia, they got blown out by Georgia, gets a bid. So the Alabama thing for me was a little confusing, but the Notre Dame thing, them not making it, to me was the right pick. Miami obviously did beat them earlier in the year. Miami beat better teams than they beat, obviously, Notre Dame. You got to join a conference. If you want to make a national championship, you got to join. You got to join a conference. Like, just go out there and join the Big 12, join the Big 10. Like, just join a conference, and you'll be able to make a run at this national championship. You're gonna have a less lesser chance of making that national championship. So if I were Notre Dame, obviously you're going to lose out on a little bit of money, but you already have a bunch of money, so just go and join a conference to give yourself a better chance of making a national championship. But I think it's really cool to see Miami in this position that they're in right now, to be honest. The getting in over Notre Dame and then going on and just making this crazy run to get here. So, yeah, but these smaller teams, I feel it's tough for them because they lose a game and lose that big game, and then it's pretty much over for them. So.
Exactly, and I like that you bring out the point about Notre Dame. They don't even have to join like a massive conference. They just have to join a conference that has enough playoff history, sustainability that just they can finish 1 or 2 and get into the playoffs. And another thing is when they don't join these conferences, their strength of schedule is nothing. So when these teams actually go back, when the committee goes back to look, they're not going to give them any consideration because they're not beating these world beaters. Miami, although their 2 losses were not the good teams, they have more impressive wins. Although Alabama had 3 losses, they had more impressive wins. They were able to go down to these places and win these games. So, and it's the common thing. Notre Dame, obviously, their big thing. I know a lot of my friends are Notre Dame fans. They say, oh, they don't want to give up the money and stuff like that. Sometimes it's not always about the money. And then another thing is, they're so petty with this that they initiated next year. If Notre Dame automatically finishes in the top 12, they are guaranteed a playoff spot. I think it's pretty petty at this point. Like, you really don't want to join a conference, and you rather have this be enforced than actually trying to do something about it. That's just how I feel about the whole situation, because the college football, it's supposed to be a sport that you're supposed to elevate the talent you have. This is where stories are supposed to be built, and I just think that it's like, if you have these guys that are in the playoffs and stuff like that. And then another thing that I brought up during this whole thing when I was doing my hot take, someone asked me about the Big 12 and stuff like that, and the conferences and stuff like that, or these Big 5 teams, they got a chance, although they got blown out, they got a chance to represent their conference. Obviously, Tulane from the American Conference, like, they got to represent themselves, and although they didn't win, these teams are showing out the talent they have, and they deserve to be recognition. If you give them that promotion, they're only going to want to improve their program and the conference as a whole. So.
Yeah, and even like you're talking about Tulane, they're the guys, like, obviously their head coach left, but there will be guys that will see that they made the national championship and they might want to transfer there because they just made the national, they made the national championship playoff. Like these smaller teams like JMU, you're seeing bigger guys transfer there because they're a better team. Like, you saw how good they played this year. Obviously not in a great conference, but they played good enough to make the national championship playoffs. And yes, they did get blown out by Oregon, but they still played pretty well. I mean, for a team that's in a smaller conference, like JMU, going up against a Big Ten team of like Oregon that's known to win these big games, they played really well, and it was pretty cool to see watching that game, seeing JMU do what they did. Obviously, still a loss, but yeah, it's these smaller teams that unfortunately they can't do as much because they don't have as much money as these guys. Like teams like Tulane, like teams like North Texas, like these smaller teams, they don't have enough money to compete with the teams like Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, which is just unfortunate. But you're always going to see Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia in the national championship playoff unless something crazy happens. But these smaller teams making it in makes them look better for the transfer portal guys that might want to portal there. So I'll throw out an example: the Memphis backup QB transferred to JMU, and Temple was looking at him, and he's really good. He's gonna have to do a QB battle there at JMU, but these guys are looking at these smaller teams and they're saying, "Oh, let's go play there. I'll get some more recognition because I'm in a smaller conference, and who knows, maybe we go on and we make a national championship playoff run." So.
Exactly, and another thing that I like to bring up about the point about this is, like, most of these guys that are transferring are like third or backups at the Alabamas, the big SEC program. So they're seeing these teams get into the playoffs, and they're like, "Hey, I'm not playing in these big schools. I'm not going to play probably till my senior year. Let me go there. Let me, after my freshman year, after basically redshirting, go there my sophomore year, elevate that program, and show myself as a talent, because these players sometimes that transfer from the bigger schools and go to the smaller schools are the ones getting higher drafted. Like, perfect example, like, I know Quinion Mitchell didn't transfer from anywhere, but he went to Toledo, not the biggest school, but he showed his talent out there, and he was able to have himself as a higher draft pick. Most of these guys in the NFL draft anymore, you see them, they started at these bigger schools, but then they went to these smaller schools and really showed the talent they had, and that's why they're getting higher drafted. The initiative these players put in, because they're actually getting the playing time and their willingness to elevate the program they're with, I think it makes college football more connected, and it makes it a very well-balanced program as a whole. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, yeah, Quinion Mitchell, obviously he played at Toledo. Temple just signed like a home-and-home with Toledo. But, yeah, like, Toledo is not a school that, like, people really talk about. People don't really watch Toledo football. People don't go out of their way to watch Toledo football. So when I saw it was between Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo and Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, and it's like, I see the name Clemson, and it's like, oh, yeah, obviously better school. But then you have to really go and watch the tape about these guys. Like, Quinion Mitchell is right now a much better cornerback than Nate Wiggins is. And the Eagles made the right pick taking Quinion Mitchell, because sometimes you gotta give guys who have played at smaller schools a chance. I mean, Quinion Mitchell was dominant at Toledo, and he's pretty dominant in the NFL too. So there are a lot of these smaller guys like Drew Mestemaker. He played at North Texas, and he had a phenomenal this year at North Texas. So there's going to be these smaller guys coming out of these smaller schools that are dominating these schools and get high draft picks because there's so many other good players on these bigger teams. But when you see a guy stand out so much at a smaller school, you might want to rather take the risk on him than a second string wide receiver out of Alabama that has one of the best QBs in college football throwing him the ball. So I think taking guys out of these smaller schools is honestly it's great for college football and the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. It's basically it's like these scouts for the NFL. It's putting the effort in to find these diamond in the roughs. Like Jamison Williams for Alabama, he was easily one of the biggest guys, but then, and obviously Chris Olave out of Ohio State and stuff like that, and then obviously Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State. But for example, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, or not the year before, but like you had these bigger guys that went to these bigger schools, but then you have a guy in Amon-Ra St. Brown, USC, didn't get that much projection, went in the 5th round. So it's like you go to these bigger schools, some get the recognition, some don't. Some of these guys that stay in the middle go to a lower college but are much more talented. Those are the type of prospects in the NFL, and I think the ever-expanding NFL that get picked and are able to perform consistently in this league. And you bring up the corners, most of those guys, you had Terrion Arnold. I remember Terrion Arnold and Quinion Mitchell were the biggest debate between the Eagles. Those were I was a big Arnold guy because I saw Alabama, but I also liked him a lot. But Arnold has not been anywhere close. He's had constant issues, and I just think it's like that ever deep Alabama core that like Arnold wasn't targeted that much, but at the same time, there's another guy on the side from like Kool-Aid McKinstry that was on the other side of him that was able to back them up. Like they're so depth loaded that like these players, yes, get higher in the draft, but then they're not with these depth teams. Like when Arnold was relied on for the Detroit Lions these past years, he wasn't able to deliver. Like yes, he's gotten better as a cornerback, but him not having that ability to be the number one guy at Alabama has translated out of the NFL, and you see the difference with him and Quinion Mitchell. So.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking on Terrion Arnold, I mean that line defense just is so injury prone, but still like he still has just not been quite as good as Quinion Mitchell. Quinion Mitchell locks up probably about every single wide receiver in the NFL, every single wide receiver one in the NFL, pretty easily. And him coming from Toledo is just really cool. How much he's improved since his first year. Like he looks like a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. I believe he is. And yeah, Terrion Arnold. I was very high on Terrion Arnold as well. Obviously coming out of Alabama, bigger name, bigger school, and sometimes you got to go with your gut. Go with the guy who had the better stats, who was the cornerback one, who was more dominant out of the smaller school, and just hoped it hit. And for the Eagles, it did hit, and I'm very glad we took Quinion Mitchell and even Cooper DeJean too. I was a smaller Big Ten school. So, but he was really good at Iowa. But we traded up for him. We took the risk on him as well, and both of them have paid off. So it's been really cool to see those two guys really bloom and just improve so much.
Exactly. And on the topic of Big Ten teams that have been smaller, let's talk about the team that's in the national championship, one that obviously has had a drastic turnaround. So the first thing I want to ask you, Cal, is has these past 2 seasons been the biggest turnaround in CFB history?
Honestly, I think that has. Like you're looking at this Indiana team, and 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you would not think they would be in this position, undefeated in the national championship. Like Kurt Signetti has just completely turned around this program. Like it has been so cool to see what he has done with this program. I mean, you bring him in. I mean, you don't expect much because this Indiana team has really never been good. It's never been a good football team. And these past 2 seasons, they have just been phenomenal. Like last season, they were winning record. Like they were really, really good. And then this season, undefeated, beating these big teams, beating Ohio State, who I thought was going to go on and win back-to-back. And obviously, like we saw, they got beat by Indiana in the Big Ten championship. And then they go on to lose in the college football playoffs. So I think, yes, for me, this has been the biggest turnaround in college football history. Fernando Mendoza came out of literally nowhere, and he has just completely revived the program. Kurt Signetti as well. I think if they win today, like this could be one of the best seasons of all time, or at least in the past 10 years, it could be one of the best seasons because they have just been so dominant all year. I was at the Penn State Indiana game where that insane, I don't know if you saw, but that insane touchdown in the back of the end zone. I was sitting in that end zone, and seeing that throw, seeing that catch right in front of my eyes was just insane. And Penn State easily could have won that game. Easily could have won that game with Grunkemeyer, with interim head coach. Like that was a crazy game. That was like really the only game where I thought Indiana could have lost, and that was just crazy to see Fernando Mendoza up close and just see that team up close. But yeah, this has definitely been the biggest turnaround in college football history, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, and I think last year was an even bigger, like, they had to face so much turmoil and stuff like that, not turmoil, I guess, in a sense, like, a lot of criticism, because, even adversity, because last year, everyone thought it was just a Cinderella year. They started the season perfect, 10-11-0, then they finally faced an Ohio State and just get destroyed, and then they're stuck in this situation where they get eliminated first round by Notre Dame, so everyone's like, oh, it's a nice Cinderella story. Indiana finally has a winning season after a bunch of losing seasons. But then they come back this season, and they're having the wins to back them up. To go down to Oregon and beat them, that was huge in the regular season. You talk about Ohio State. Although Penn State was not this good this season, the ability for Fernando Mendoza to just have that clutch gene in him all season, reason why he won the Heisman, he had Heisman moments. Sometimes people look at stats and be like, oh, that guy should win the Heisman because of his stats. It's not all about the stats sometimes. Heisman, I think, majority of it should be on the Heisman moments. Like, a Heisman Trophy winner has to be special, not only on the stats, but on the field itself. And Mendoza made special plays when they were needed. Although although the catch was insane by Omar Cooper to get 1 foot down, the ability for Mendoza to get them down the field with Penn State, I know it had to be rocking down there, that final drive.
Oh my God, it was. That was crazy.
Because they just took the lead after being down. So, because I watched that full fourth quarter. That fourth quarter was insane. So.
That fourth quarter was nuts. Oh my God, Beaver Stadium was rocking. That was crazy.
Yeah, but just going back with Mendoza, to get down the field and to make that play in the closing seconds is just his ability to do that. And then, although Indiana didn't play their best game against Ohio State, when it came down to it, Fernando Mendoza made the throw that he needed to make to Charlie Becker. Like, not only what Mendoza been able to do to this offense, the way he's been able to elevate these receivers. Omar Cooper, Charlie Becker have become Elijah Sherratt. They've become guys in the college football world because of what Mendoza's done, but then also their ability to make special plays. But this brings me to my next question. You talk about this. If they win tonight, this is going to be one of the special teams. Obviously, you said in the past 10 years, obviously there's one competition that they could be held up with. Obviously, that's 2019 LSU. If they win tonight, and they in that type of category, you think 2019 LSU is in its own echelon?
Honestly, I gotta put 2019 LSU in its own echelon. That team was just insane. Like Joe Burrow was like out of the world good. That 2019 LSU team was. I mean, I gotta say, if you were to put this 2025-2026 Indiana team up against this 2019 LSU team, LSU I think would beat that by, I think, touchdown, to be honest. Like their offense was just so dominant that year. And obviously Indiana's defense has been so good. Fernando Mendoza has been so good, but I just don't know if this Indiana team would have the firepower to keep up with that 2019 LSU team. That team was just insane. Yes, if they win this game, it could be very close, but I don't know if Indiana will be able to overtake that 2019 LSU team. That 2019 LSU team is the best college football team probably ever made. So I really want to say they would be in 2019 LSU talks, but I just don't know if they can. I don't know if I could really put them in the same category. But literally, it's so close. It's so close. If Indiana does end up blowing out Miami by 40 points, I think I could put them in the same category. But I don't know if Indiana's be able to blow out Miami with their defense. So
Yeah, I think there's ways you could justify for both. One positive way I think you do it is LSU didn't have to go through the college football playoffs like Indiana had to.
yes, that is true.
But also at the same time, Indiana, I bring up the point, yes, Mendoza had his Heisman moments. LSU was just blowing the doors off of everyone they faced. And when they faced these big schools like Alabama, like that game in 2019, Alabama LSU, that was a track race between Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, going back and forth. LSU was so dominant all the way up until the national championship, where they blew the doors off of Clemson. Trevor Lawrence stood no chance. He was easily one of the better quarterbacks. And then the only similarities that I see in those teams is the quarterbacks, because Joe Burrow, Mendoza, both transferred. Obviously, Joe Burrow was more known.
Yes, that's true.
But they were able to elevate themselves so much during the season that they both were able to win the Heisman, and both are probably going to be number one picks. That's the similarity I see between the two, but I do think LSU just takes it a little bit over, because to have that special of a team, I think defense wins you championships a lot in a sense, but to have that dominant of an offense that most of these guys are still translating in the league too. Sometimes, who's to say some of these guys in Indiana, yes, they're good now, but if they make it to the league, maybe they flame out. These guys in LSU that were part of that team, they're still dominant in the NFL today, so you can tell it's not a fluke team. So, but we talked about Indiana. Let's talk about their opponent, who are actually in their home stadium for the national championship, although they're not the home team technically. The Miami Hurricanes, who've had an insane run, starting in Texas A&M, where they had that win. Then I think the biggest shock of the CFB playoffs, them beating the reigning champions in Ohio State. Then, obviously, the great game that they had against Ole Miss. That back-and-forth game was great, and now has set them up for the national championship against Indiana. So the first question I have for you is, does this offense have enough consistency to keep it up with Indiana? Obviously, Indiana's offense has been up and down, but they can fire on all cylinders when they need to. Does Miami have enough to sustain success with them?
To be honest, from what I've seen, they have turned it on in this playoffs. They have played phenomenal in the playoffs. Carson Beck has played really well. I know they beat Ohio State. I know they beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a good defense. Ole Miss was a great team, and obviously Ohio State. But I don't think they have enough on offense, to be honest. Carson Beck has been playing very well. I just don't know if I don't know. I think their defense is going to be able to get some stops on Indiana. I think especially in the beginning of the game, both these teams are going to be very amped up. I think their defense is going to be very amped up. So I think they'll be able to get a stop or two against Indiana. But then eventually, I feel like Indiana's just going to eventually just figure it out. I mean, this is their first national championship in however long. And I just don't think that Miami's offense has enough firepower to be able to keep up with Fernando Mendoza, who's the consensus #1 pick. And shout out to Carson Beck for having a phenomenal season, for getting them to this spot, especially after transferring here from Georgia. And he has just silenced all the haters this year, and especially since it was between them and Notre Dame to get into the playoff, and the committee took Miami, and Miami ended up where they are in the national championship. So obviously they have the firepower to get here. I just don't know if they have enough to keep up with the 15-0 Indiana team. I mean, this team is undefeated for a reason. So it's going to be tough for Miami, but I don't think they'll be able to keep up enough with Indiana to be able to get the win tonight.
Yeah. And I like that you bring up the point about Miami actually being able to justify the committee's decision to get them in. But I like that. I agree with what you're saying, because I think Indiana can win in a multitude of ways, and I don't think Miami can do that. Miami has its own specific style to run the ball through Mark Fletcher, to get Malachi Toney involved in the running and the passing game. But Indiana is going to be ready for that. They're going to be ready for whatever Miami has to throw at them. But Indiana can win in a shootout. They can win, or excuse me, Indiana can win in a shootout. They can win in a very close game that goes into the fourth quarter. They can win in a multitude of ways. It's been shown all season. I don't think Miami is going to be ready for that on the offensive side of the ball, because they'll be ready to run their game plan. But I don't think Miami will be able to adjust enough like Indiana can and have done all season. So, but then you bring up the point about the defense. Obviously, Miami's had they've had the most dominant defensive ends duo in college football with Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. Do you think they'll be able to get to Mendoza enough tonight to keep this game contained enough?
That's tough, because they have been so good this year. This pass rush duo has been phenomenal all year, and I don't know if Mendoza has. I mean, we've seen what Mendoza's been able to do this year, scrambling, and he's done a really good job of scrambling and making plays on the run. I just don't know if he'll be able to do it against this pass rush duo. This pass rush duo have just been they have gone to the QB all season. They have done such a good job this year, and especially in the the playoffs. They have just done a phenomenal job of just disrupting the QBs and just getting through these O-line and making it look really easy. So I don't know if their O-line is going to be able to keep up with this pass rush duo, but I think Mendoza is good enough at scrambling and getting out of the pocket and making plays on the run, making throws on the run, scrambling, that I think he's going to be able to evade this pass rush duo. But I think this pass rush duo is definitely going to get home. I think at least 1 or 2 times tonight, if not 3. But I think Mendoza is a good enough QB, and he's capable of escaping those tacklers and escaping that pass rush duo and getting to and getting those open wide receivers, hitting those open wide receivers on the sidelines and in the middle of the field. So obviously, I got to give my props to this Miami pass rush duo this year, but I don't think that they're going to be able to do enough to be able to contain Mendoza and contain this Indiana offense. Because especially with Coach Tignetti, he's going to be able to figure it out eventually. He'll send more blockers if he needs to. And like I said earlier, I think this defense is going to come out hot. This Miami defense has a lot of momentum. They're on a roll right now. I think they're going to come out firing. I could see 1 or 2 sacks in the first drive or two. But eventually Mendoza is going to be able to settle in and make the throws that he needs to make the runs that he needs to be able to win this game for Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, and I think it's been shown. Obviously, they did a great job against Marcel Reed and Texas A&M, but perfect example last week, Trinidad Chambles, what he was able to do, he shredded through that Miami defense when he needed to. And perfect example, that final drive, I don't know how he's able to do what he's done. He's had a special season.
Yeah.
And
he's been so good. that I did not see that coming, to be honest. I'm not at all.
Exactly, and he's elevated his game ever since Lane Kiffin's left, which has I think it's a prop to him to what he's able to do. Your head coach, the main reason you probably transferred there, because I don't know if you saw the report, if he was where he was about to go before Ole Miss. Yeah.
I did. Oh yeah, I did.
Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, and I think he did last week. I think Indiana can utilize that to their advantage this week because Mendoza's a good enough scrambler to get out of the pocket and create plays to his pass catchers. And although Ruben Bain and Messador have been amazing, they've been shown to be blocked before. And Indiana has easily one of the best offensive line in the entire nation. It's taken them to this point. They have good run game. They have good pass game. So I think if they're able to sustain it enough where they're blocking these guys and Mendoza's getting out of the pocket, creating plays, it's going to be tough for these guys to generate any pressure. And I think if we get to the second, third quarter and Mendoza's not been sacked yet, if he's been pressured, then I think it's fine. But if he hasn't maybe got, one of these guys haven't got pressured by him, then I think it's going to be cruise control for Indiana. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think to be able to disrupt Indiana, to be able to throw them off a little bit, I think one of these pass rushers got to get home at least once in the first two quarters, in the first half, just to be able to, kind of just show this O-line what they're about. And like you said, this O-line is probably the best in the nation. And I think if one of the pass rushers gets home in once or twice in the first half, I think it'll be able to kind of disrupt Indiana's offense enough where they'll be able to get some stops in the first half. But I think coming out of halftime, this Indiana team, if they're down or if it's close, I think this Indiana team is just going to come out firing, and I think they're going to really turn it on. But I think this pass rush dude's got to get home at least once in the first half, just to slow some momentum down if Indiana has any. But obviously they're coming in here with 15-0 with momentum already, so it's gonna be tough for the pass rushers against this O line. But if they want to be able to get some stops, they gotta get some sacks.
Exactly. And I think another thing for this Indiana team is they haven't faced much controversy. They haven't had to go into the game and a perfect example last week, second play of the game, Dante Moore throws a pick six and Indiana's in control like that. Obviously, Oregon went down to tie the score at 7, but after that, it was completely Indiana cruise control. They haven't had to face any controversy, any momentum swings. Most of it has been guided to that. So let me ask you this for your ultimate prediction. Do you think Miami is able to figure something out, or do you think Indiana completes the perfect season?
Yeah, so I've actually been thinking a lot about this. I've seen reports about both sides, Miami, Indiana, but for me, I think I gotta give Indiana their flowers. I think they go for a perfect season here. I think Fernando Mendoza does what he needs to do, throws a few touchdowns, and I think their defense gets enough stops to where Miami is just not able to score enough to be able to beat this Indiana team, and Mendoza is just going to finish off this perfect season with his Heisman, with a national championship, and with a perfect season, and then probably go off again, take number 1, and just right off into the sunset from there. But I'm going to take Indiana 28-17. I think it's going to be a pretty middle scoring game, and I think Miami's going to be able to put up some points early, but I just think Indiana is too much for Miami to eventually stop and for Miami to get the win. So yeah, I have to take Indiana on this game.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you. And before I say it, I have a similar score prediction. I was going to go with 27-17. I do agree. I think Miami's going to score around 17. I just think there's going to be something. I just like I like a 10. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a 10-point game, but I think the score won't represent this game. I think it will be close in the first quarter, but I think Indiana will grab control in the second quarter, and I think it'll just be a game of attrition and Indiana just running it down their throats, timely passes, and just stopping Carson Beck. I think Miami's going to go for it on fourth down a lot tonight, and their inability to pick it up, I think, is what's going to lose in this game because obviously they've had kicker issues. I think their kicker maybe knocks in a 1 or 2 tonight, but I think they're going to be stuck in a lot of situations where they're going to have to go for it on fourth down, and Carson Beck just won't be able to make the plays pick those up. So I'm going to go with 27-17 Indiana, just because I think their way of winning in multitude of ways, I think, is what's going to win in this game. And I think Miami's one-dimensional in their offense, while Indiana can throw 4 or 5 different things at you.
Yeah, the only way I see Miami winning is if they get out to like a 14-0 lead, 21-0 lead early, and then Indiana is just pretty much silent for the whole first half, and then the second half, Indiana comes out slow because, like you said earlier, if Miami's in their home stadium, it's going to be loud. There's going to be a lot of Miami fans. Indiana does travel very well, but I think Miami having that home field advantage could definitely help them out a little bit, especially trying to get some stops and stuff. But I still think that Indiana is just too good of a football team to let Miami run all over them and stuff. So, like you said, Miami's very one-dimensional, and Indiana can score in a multitude of ways, whether it's running the ball, throwing the ball, whether it's Mendoza running the ball. So I just think Indiana is just a better football team all around on the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball. So, but I definitely think that Miami's home field advantage will help them out a little bit. But like I said, I'm still taking Indiana.
Exactly. I think it's just going to come down to is if Miami can start strong, and if they don't start strong, I think Indiana will just be able to figure out what type of game they're in and just adjust from there. Because Kurt Cignetti, he says Google him and stuff like that. There's no Googling this offense. I think you can game plan all you want for it, but at the end of the day, he's going to throw out something that once he figured out the mood of the game, then it's pretty much over. I think Miami needs to start strong, and if they don't, Cignetti will figure out the type this game is going to be and just exploit Miami for all their weaknesses. So.
Exactly.
But before we wrap things up, do you have any closing thoughts about this game or anything college football related?
I think it's going to be a good game. It's Miami, Indiana, Mario Cristobal versus Kurt Cignetti, Mendoza versus Beck. And I said earlier that Beck has faced a lot of adversity, but he's silenced the haters. So I just want to give a shout out to this Miami team for making it to this position, because nobody really thought they would be here. A lot of people thought it would be Ohio State. A lot of people thought that it would be Indiana, Ohio State, and out of all teams, it's Miami, it's the U. So I got to give a shout out to the U, and then obviously Indiana, 15-0, perfect season, and they could wrap it up perfectly here and right off into the sunset and win a national championship. But yeah, and then I think even for next year, I think this Indiana team losing Mendoza, I think they'll still be very, very good. And I think this Miami team will be good. And I transfer portal did close yesterday, so all these players go to new teams. So I think next year the college football is going to be very interesting, especially with all these players getting paid so much money to go to these different schools, all these transfers. And all these head coach hires in college football. There have been so many new head coaches on these teams. So I think it'll be a very interesting year next year. But for tonight, I think it's going to be a phenomenal game. And it was just it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think you said this. What's happened during the playoffs, not like outside of the playoffs with the coaches, the transfer portals. Obviously, the big thing of Dante Moore going back to college after being the projected number 2 overall pick, and also on top of that, what's his name, Dylan Raiola going to Oregon. He made that decision before Dante Moore was coming back, so he's probably going to redshirt his sophomore year, and all the moves that are going around there, and then obviously Sam Levitt joining Lane Kiffin in LSU to be the quarterback there, the movement around with coaches and players, I think, is going to set up an even better college football next season. I can't wait for LSU Ole Miss next year. I think that's going to be the game of the.
That's going to be cinema.
It is. Yeah, I cannot wait for that game.
It's going to be amazing. Yeah, and I talked about Penn State earlier. They got a really good coach in Matt Campbell. They pretty much took the whole Iowa State roster and just put it on the Penn State's roster. So I think Penn State will be a good team next year. I think they could win 10 games, 11 games, to maybe even make a college football playoff next year. But we'll have to see it's going to be an exciting year of college football next year. I'm very excited, but for now, we still got one more game, and it's definitely going to be a good one. So.
Yep, for sure. But this is going to wrap up today's episode. I'd like to thank Cal for coming on and giving his thoughts. Obviously, we have a great championship game tonight, and then it was an even better action-packed college football playoffs. But then, as I usually do, we'll be back probably with a divisional round. Obviously, the divisional round just wrapped up last night, so a lot of games happened. So I'll be back with you guys later in the week, and then I'll be giving you guys my reaction to the national championship tonight. But other than that, once again, thank Cal for coming on and giving his thoughts. But we'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy the national championship tonight, and peace.